Should Nigel Farage be welcomed into the Conservative Party? It's time now for the head-to-head. And as Rishi Sunak attempts to move on from the backlash to skipping a D-Day commemoration event last week, his former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has urged the Tories to unite the right and embrace Nigel Farage. Speaking to The Times, Braverman said, "I would welcome Nigel into the Conservative Party. There's not much difference really between him and many of the policies that we stand for." But speaking earlier today, Nigel Farage was quick to pour cold water over that suggestion.
Braverman said I should rejoin the Conservatives because our policies are very similar. I don't think so. You know, what they've done, allowing nearly 2.5 million people to settle in the country in the last 2 years, is most certainly not our policy. So I do like her, I do admire her, but I'm afraid, at the moment, all marriage plans are off.
All marriage plans are off. There we go. Rishi Sunak, meanwhile, he didn't exactly jump at Braverman's suggestion either when he was asked about it.
Only one of two people will be Prime Minister on July the 5th, Keir Starmer or I. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate just makes it more likely that Keir Starmer is Prime Minister.
So tonight I'm asking, should Nigel Farage be welcomed into the Conservative Party? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/your say or tweet me at GBNews, and whilst you're there voting the poll, I'll bring you those results in just a few minutes. But first, going head-to-head on this are former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Nile Gardiner, and the former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. About to say good morning. Good evening to you both. Thanks for joining me. Niall, let's start with you. Should Nigel be welcomed back into the Conservative Party? And also, what would your old boss, Margaret Thatcher, say to it?
Well, thanks very much for having me on the show today, Ben. And in response to your question, it's certainly my view, I think, that Nigel Farage should be welcomed into the Conservative Party. He has made it clear, though, he doesn't want to do some kind of pact ahead of the election. But post-election, if the Conservatives are in opposition, and if Reform, for example, have 3 or 4 seats potentially, I think it makes a lot of sense for Reform to be working closely with the Conservatives, or indeed for Nigel Farage to be part of the Conservative Party fold. After all, he is the most, I think, important and influential British Conservative alongside Boris Johnson since the days of Margaret Thatcher. At heart, Nigel is a very strong, robust Thatcherite Conservative. And I do think in a post-election landscape, he should be welcomed into the Conservative Party. I think Suella Braverman is absolutely right to suggest that he should be brought into the fold. And I know there are many other senior Conservative figures that I've spoken to who would be very keen actually to have Nigel Farage back inside the Conservative Party. So I do think the Conservatives really have to be united on multiple fronts. It has to be a united Conservative movement. It makes no sense to split the Conservative movement down the middle between the Conservative Party and Reform.
Yeah, but Niall, Farage and Reform certainly would say that the problem is that the Conservative Party isn't a Conservative movement. In actual fact, it's probably filled to the rafters with Lib Dems.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for that point of view. I mean, there are a lot of lefties inside the Conservative Party, it has to be said. And I think that this election certainly will be sorting that out in terms of the next leader of the Conservative Party has to be somebody who is a real Conservative, who believes in Conservative policies. The Conservative Party needs to get rid of all these sort of wet elements and return to being a true Conservative Thatcherite party.
Let me ask Charlie Rowley. Charlie, are you a Conservative wet? And was your old boss, Michael Gove, guilty of that charge as well?
I could be described as being a bit wet from time to time, but I think that's because I agree with Nigel and I agree with Niall. Nigel himself said this afternoon that it's not a possibility, it's not going to happen, the marriage is off, and I think, you know, when you spend your time, and particularly this campaign, wanting to destroy the Conservative Party, then there'll clearly be no room at the inn. But Niall made a point there a second ago, which is you don't want to divide the party, and I don't think it's about uniting the right of a Conservative Party. Yes, there is crossover between the Conservatives and what Reform are offering when it comes to single issues such as Brexit, such as immigration, things that are really important to communities up and down this country. But you've got to understand that the Conservative Party is a very, very broad church. It isn't just a vocal aspect on the right.
Charlie, the fact they are such a broad church and, you know, they welcome anyone and everyone. What happens to just being Conservatives?
Well, the reason I think that the Tories have lost support is because of the political dramas that have taken place over the last few years, the chopping and changing of leader, the loss of trust that's been in politics with Partygate, with a 49-day term Prime Minister, coupled with a Prime Minister that has continued to talk about things that matter to people, like Rwanda, that hasn't offered tax cuts as quickly as I think many Conservatives would want. But if you simply just focus on uniting the right and totally ignore actually the more pragmatic approach, the one nation approach, the people that came to vote for the Conservatives again in 2010 and 2015 under David Cameron, you're at risk of ignoring the south and the south east and southwest of the UK, people that might be slightly more liberal. That will bring the Conservative Party together. That's what's going to win them the next election.
Lots of Conservative members have told me in recent weeks and months and even the past year that it's that you don't win an election with what the Conservatives are doing on the centre ground. For example, Nile Gardiner, your old boss, Margaret Thatcher, she didn't move to the centre ground. She made voters come to her where she was.
Yeah, exactly. Margaret Thatcher shifted the Conservative Party dramatically and significantly to the right, and that's why she won 3 general elections in a row. The reason why the Conservatives are doing so poorly right now is because they have, in many respects, abandoned Thatcherite Conservative principles and ideals. Also, of course, I think the removal of Boris Johnson was a catastrophic mistake, actually, and the Conservatives are still paying the price for that. The only way I think the Conservatives can come back 5 years from now, if they lose this general election, frankly, is by returning to core Conservative principles. If you're the Conservative Party, you've got to stand for Conservative ideas and principles. You cannot be a wishy-washy party that includes all sorts of liberal, lefty, woke types, actually. A Conservative Party has to be a real Conservative Party, which is why, as I mentioned earlier, I think Nigel Farage would be very welcome in terms of returning to the Conservative Party fold. And the Conservatives need more figures like Nigel Farage, actually, if they have any hope of taking back control if they lose it in this general election.
Charlie Rowley, last word to you. Nigel Farage would say, and Richard Tice from Reform would say, that a vote for the Conservatives is a vote for Labour, not the other way round in terms of Reform letting Labour into number 10.
Well, that just simply isn't true, because at the end of the day, there's only going to be, as the Prime Minister said, one man that's going to be Prime Minister, and it'll be either be Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. So you've got to vote for either one of those two parties, really, if you want to stick with a Conservative Party that has seen the economy grow now, that is going to be committed to tax cuts, not tax freezes or tax rises under the Labour Party. There is lots of crossover with the Reform that wants to see those tax cuts, corporation tax cut, and making sure that self-employed people are getting a bit of a break as well. So there will be lots and dealing with immigration, so there'll be lots of crossover there. But, but the central point is that, either one of those two men will become Prime Minister, so a vote for any other party would be effectively a wasted vote. And
just quickly, in 10 seconds, your old boss, Michael Gove, I'm not sure if you've spoken to him recently, but would he, if he were standing again, would he welcome Nigel into the fold?
I think Michael would say that there is plenty of talent on the Conservative Party benches already.
OK, Charlie Rowley, Nile Gardiner, thanks very much. Appreciate your time.